Hey friends, welcome to December. It's wonderful to be here with you guys. It's finally gotten cold. This has been a pretty warm winter for a lot of the country. We're finally getting some cold weather, and we're going to be talking about what that means for you and what that means for your bees this month. If we haven't met yet, my name is Blake Shook. I'm one of the owners of the Bee Supply. I started with two hives in my backyard and have over 30,000 now, and I love to take 30 to 45 minutes every month and just talk about what you need to be doing in your bees to be successful and glean from some of the tips and tricks I've learned over the past 20 years of beekeeping. So we try to stay practical in these videos. We try to make it helpful and useful and relevant to the month that we're in. So we've actually got quite a bit to cover. So let's jump right in. If you live in Texas or the surrounding states, now is the time to get your order in for your bees. So we have all these available on our website, along with our famous 30-day guarantee. Whether you need packages, whether you need nooks, whether you want singles, we've got you covered. So check out our website and get those bees pre-ordered. They're selling really, really well this year. A lot of our early dates are already sold out. Our sales are ahead of where they were last year. So go in and get those ordered quickly before we sell out of all those early dates. We've also partnered with Oliveira's honeybees this year, and we're offering several different kinds of package bees: Italian, Carnolian, Saskatraz, Golden West by Randy Oliver. So that's an exciting new thing that we haven't done in the past. So we've got four different breeds or flavors of package bees that we've never had before. So check out all the different variations of package bees that you can now get from the bee supply. Global pollen patties are in stock. We'll talk about that a little bit more this evening. So if you need some pollen patties for your bees, we've got you covered there. And then, of course, stand saw sugar bricks, which are fantastic for fall and winter feeding. Once the bees start to cluster in the hive, once daytime temperatures are in the 50s or below, bees are not going to go drink liquid syrup anymore. And so you need something like one of stand soft sugar bricks to sit directly above the brood nest so the bees can feed on it even when they're clustered. So this is a great product. I can't ever say enough good about them. They're wonderful. Okay, so last commercial for you guys, and I am so incredibly excited about this one. I mean, a lot of you have been watching these webinars for years. You know me well. You followed my career for many years. And this next thing I want to talk to you guys about is something I have been working on for years. And I cannot believe that it's finally here. But I am so excited to show you guys a book that I've written that is going to be available for pre-order. We'll start shipping these out in January. And if you go to the description and comments below this video, you'll see a link where you can pre-order the Golden Rules of Beekeeping. And I've partnered with Kamon Reynolds, which a lot of you guys know, to also write this book. And so I've been working on it for years, and I invited Kamon to help me with the book and help co-author it, and he's added a ton to this book. It never would have happened without Sherry Elam, who you guys all know well. Her husband James was James also helped a ton with this book. He helped proofread all the topics early on that I wrote and made suggestions from a beekeeping perspective. And then poor Sherry has probably read this book 100 times, proofreading, editing, gathering pictures for it, formatting, and everything in between. And it never would have happened without them. So I mean, this book, I am so proud of it. This is 250 of the most common questions asked in all of beekeeping. So this is the perfect book, whether you're in your first year of beekeeping, or you're a veteran beekeeper. It's going to answer basically every practical question you could ask in beekeeping, from how do I find my queen, to do I need an inner cover, to how do I make a split, to what happens if my hive is queenless, to how do I feed bees. Every conceivable topic that I could think of from years and years and years of answering topics of all forms on beekeeping is in this book. I've looked at thousands of questions on social media. We get thousands of questions a year into the bee supply, and the answers to all those questions are in this book. It is basically very few practical beekeeping questions that I think you could have that aren't answered in here. So I am beyond excited about it. I am excited because I think that it's one of the greatest resources for the beekeeping industry. I don't think there's a book like this out here where, two beekeepers that have been beekeeping their entire lives just focused on practical answers. So we don't get into a ton of scientific answers. This is something that you have on hand at all times. And when you come to a problem in your hive that you don't know the answer to, you open this book and it's going to give you an answer that's direct to the point, it's practical and helpful. One other quick thing I want to highlight on here is that the way I wrote it and Kamon wrote it is that at the beginning of each topic, so there's 250 topics. At the beginning of each topic, we have a quick answer that's about 1 to 2 sentences long, that's just really brief, really to the point. If you don't want to read the whole page, you can just, do I need an inner cover or not? The answer is yes. If you have a telescoping cover, you do need an inner cover. If you don't have a telescoping cover, you don't need one. It's that brief. And then you can read the rest of the page to get a much more in-depth answer about why and how to use it, etc. But it's just a quick field guide handbook that you can flip to reference all throughout your beekeeping journey. And I'm just incredibly excited that after years of working on it, it's right there being printed, ready to ship. So again, I'll pause, but I would love for you guys to pre-order if you are interested in it. Go down to the description, follow that link, pre-order it. That gives us a feel for how many of these things we need to get printed. And I can't wait to hear your feedback on the book. I think you're going to love it. I think you're going to find it incredibly helpful. And I appreciate your support and asking all the questions you guys have asked, because that has fed the answers to this book. So, with that, Sherry, what December topics do we have? I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about what we're working on education wise.
Well, thank you. And I can't wait for the book to be right here in my hands. I can't tell you how excited I am as well, and so proud of you, Blake. Just
Thank you.
such an honor to be a part of this.
It's been fun. It's been
It
long,
has
but it's
been
been
fun.
fun.
It has been fun. We
Yeah,
got to start working on book number two.
absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Well, December topics, y'all. It's December. It's December. It's cold, and I'm wearing sweatshirts today and sweatpants. My gosh, and the bees are doing what? They're inside of their hives, staying nice and warm. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. So we have 5 weeks for December, and we are going to kind of give you a little bit of a different ending to the year with week 4 and 5. But starting week 1, in your emails, you'll see, and all of these are on the website now, ready for you to read. Okay. Can I feed honey back to my bees? Big question. I've had that. If I had a dollar, you've heard that saying, right? Many times have I been asked this question because we have it back in our freezer. We end up with extra. This article is going to answer that and be very descriptive on how and when and how to do it. Week 2, in your emails, you're going to see temperature dynamics of a winter cluster. I love, love, love this article. It's written by a friend of ours, Lauren Ward. She's an entomologist, and it's a super wonderful description of what's going on inside your hives when it is cold outside. And this is really important when you're learning the dynamics of what's going on there. It truly helps you become a better beekeeper because you know what to look for or what I'm not seeing if I go in and to take a quick peek on my winter's inspection. So I'm going to highlight that here in just a minute. Week 3, hive forensics. We hate this topic because it typically means I've got a dead hive, but it helps us to learn from what happened, looking into the hives, taking the clues that are left behind if something happened bad, and trying to discern what can I do differently next time and what happened, because the bees don't leave us a note, do they? Mine don't. It would be nice, right? Just have a little chalkboard. Well, we died because, and that way it would save us a lot of heartache. But this will help you. That article will really help you. Week 4, we're going to talk about Christmas in the Beeyard. Got a wonderful little treat for you coming in week 4 through emails. And then week 5, it's the last week of this year, and we've got some surprises coming through the email. So if you're not signed up, go to the TBS Monthly Articles tab on our website, thebeesupply.com, and in the know, put your email there because that's where you will ensure you get all of these sent to you. Otherwise, the articles are always there. And don't forget to ask Blake Bot. All right, Blake, slide that slide. Let's talk about temperature dynamics of the winter cluster. Um, that picture, because I know what it is, could be deceiving. That is actually a dead small cluster. There weren't enough bees in that hive to keep it warm, and they literally died huddling up. And that's such a sad, sad sight. And I've seen it in other hives. I've not really had it happen too many times, maybe once or twice over the dozen plus years, but it's a sad thing that we don't want to see, but we can control leading up to winter. But talking about the dynamics of that cluster, bees don't hibernate. And Lauren goes into it's an awesome article, y'all. It goes into really a great description of how bees go into winter. They're prepared before we even get to the cold part, right? But instead of hibernating, the entire colony changes its whole behavior. It's the solid, I can't say that word. I knew I was going to mess that word up. The whole way they work to ride out winter because they've got to, in their little bug selves, stay in there, keep warm, and keep their temperatures up in order to survive. So they cluster around 57 degrees. I took that from the article. If you were wondering what temperature it was, so I'm going to tell you, all our bees are clustering today because it's cold. They generate heat by using their flight muscles, which I'm sure some of you have heard that, to shiver their wings, creating whatever it is they need. And depending on what the weather, and of course, we're in Texas, Blake and I both, so the weather gets warmer some days and then cold some days. So with our hives, they'll break cluster on days. We'll have a week where it'll jump up into 70s and even low 80s in the middle of winter, and our bees will break cluster and they won't have to do this, but then they'll consume a lot of food. But then when it starts to get cold again, they will cluster back up. And as they do that, they're kind of rotating on that. It's called a mantle. They're rotating each other so that the outside ones don't freeze. And it kind of just keeps that ball and the queen inside nice and toasty. Now, weak hives, like that picture, is where this is an issue because if there are not enough bees to keep that queen or that hive warm, then they will succumb to it. Hives consume stored honey, and it's really important to know where the location of that honey is during winter. One thing I remember I'm going to say fondly, but it wasn't so fond, was that when we had a super bad winter back in 2021, when we were in the single digits, which I know a lot of you deal with that up north all the time. I personally couldn't ever do that. But our bees did okay because James Elam put the honey right close to their cluster. Because truly, if they break cluster to eat, which they have to periodically because they're burning energy in that shivering, if they've got to break cluster, the basically those bees, number one, well, they'll drop off, and every bee that's exposed to that extreme cold will. So you want to make sure to keep food close to the cluster. Um, but it talks about that in that article. The takeaway: hives are very capable of keeping themselves warm under most circumstances and even without insulation. And Blake's talked about that before. But keep checking on your winter stores. Keeping it within reach of that cluster is really going to be your best bet on a warm day. If you need to go in and check, make sure that that food is close by or right above their heads where they can just get to it really easily. All right, Blake, that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sherry. Always incredible information. We always so appreciate you. Okay, let's jump out into the bee yard. There's not as much going on in the bee yard this time of year, but let's tackle a couple quick topics and then we will jump back in to the classroom. Okay, so let's take a quick look in this hive and just see what it looks like. I'm just really curious, being December, what they're up to. We've got a decent bee population in this one. And I just want to see, do they have brood? Do they have pollen? Do
They have stores. The weather is so warm that we're definitely going to see bees working later than normal. So this one, you can see there's a fair amount of bees in here. They've got a little bit of capped brood. It's probably hard to see. They've got a little bit of capped brood there in the middle, but largely they've just kind of backfilled this brood nest area with honey, which is kind of exactly what I would expect them to do, because they really don't need to be rearing brood this late in the year. So some hives will still have quite a bit of brood, and some hives won't have a whole lot. So this one, there's actually the queen on the bottom of this frame. If you can spot her, she's near the bottom. You probably can't see, but this frame actually has quite a bit of eggs in it. So we've got some cat brood on this side that you can see, and then this other side we've got, she's got about a half a frame full of eggs. Now, a lot of times what you'll see is we'll have these warm spells and the queen will start laying, and she'll lay a half a frame or a frame full of eggs. And then when it gets cold again, sometimes the bees will go back and they'll eat those eggs. They won't let them develop because it's just too late in the year and it takes too many of their resources. But sometimes they'll go ahead and develop them. But you often see kind of that half frame of eggs, and then the next time you inspect, it disappears. But this hive overall looks pretty good. I mean, look at all that honey. I mean, they've got, lots of frames of honey in the brood box down below. They've got, I'm gonna say probably 40 pounds of honey at least in this second box. And we've got a queen because I see eggs. We saw the queen. Population looks good. I'm pretty much done. So winter inspection in December can be that fast. It's a warm, sunny day today, so I can go to a hive, give them some smoke, pull out a few frames, check population, done. Let's talk a little bit about sugar bricks and how to install them. So I've got one of our sugar bricks here in our packaging, and sugar bricks are a great way to feed this time of year if your hive still needs food. So if it's still 75 degrees on average outside, if it's October, I feed syrup because the bees can store it more readily in the combs and they can utilize it more quickly. A sugar brick, it's gonna take a little longer for them to eat, but you can put it directly on top of the cluster, which is what's important this time of year. So sugar bricks are a great option if your hive still needs food this late in the year. So I recommend feeding them, mid-November through late January is a great time of year to use sugar bricks. I love this one that Stan developed, which is the one that we sell because it has some protein in it. It's got, lots of different vitamins and minerals in it. It's a great resource for the bees. I like it because it's also a form of insurance. So if you think your hive may not have quite enough food, it doesn't hurt just to throw a sugar brick on and let them eat it throughout the winter. So there's a number of different ways you can install a sugar brick. You can put it directly on top of the hive. The big thing I look for is I really want it to be right where there are a lot of bees, because your bees need direct access to this brick in order to use it. So, we've got this hive, and you probably can't see from the video very well, but there's a lot of bees all the way up in this top box. And so I want that sugar brick where the bees have easy access to it. If there's no bees in your top box, you might want to take the top box off. And so there's a number of different things you can do. You can put down a sheet of newspaper and put the sugar brick on top of it. I like to just put it directly on top of the top bars. It's okay if it's a little crumbly. Sometimes I like it to be in 3 or 4 different pieces because it gives the bees better surface access or more surface access to the brick. So I like it to be in a handful of pieces, and I'm going to put it right in the middle, right on top of where the bees are clustering. And then you can take, we sell these are just an overwintering inner cover, and it's a little bit deeper. As you can see, it's got a deeper opening. And so that allows plenty of space for those sugar bricks. And then you can put your telescoping cover right back up on top. A shallow box also works. So if you just get a medium or a shallow box with no frames, that can work as a spacer. If you you can, I don't recommend it quite as much, but you can get a shallow box or a rim like this. You can take a box and cut a couple inch rim, and you could put the rim between two of your boxes and a sugar brick between two of your boxes. The reason I'm not always a fan of that approach is you're really separating your boxes, and it's harder for the bees to cluster when there's that gap in between them. So in general, I really like the sugar bricks to go directly on top of the hive, just like this. And if there's, like I said, if this box were completely empty, then I would either pull it off and put the sugar brick, on top of this box where there's more bees, or I would take this box, if it's full of honey, and I would actually put it on the very bottom underneath this box. And that way the bees could still access it if they wanted it. And you could put the sugar brick on top. So you can always move those boxes of honey if they don't have a lot of bees in them down to the very bottom, and the bees can pull from it, as they need it throughout the winter. But the cool thing is, I mean, you probably can't see it in the video, but I mean, there's already bees all over these sugar bricks. So I mean, they're already covering it just in a couple of minutes. The bees really love them. It gives them something to do throughout the year. So it's a great tool for this time of year when the bees need feed.
Welcome back from the Beeyard. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. We have some questions from you guys this month, and Sherry always does a great job of gathering these things up. So, Sherry, what are some of the questions we have to answer this month?
They're actually very good questions.
They always are.
One time, every year, it seems like we have the same questions over and over. And that's a segue to why that book is going to answer some of this stuff so well for you, because we really do. Depending on who you are, it's the same questions, but maybe molded a little bit differently. I love these. So I had several that were similar, and I narrowed it down to these. For a medium-sized average strength hive, how long would stand soft sugar brick last before I need to replace it?
It's a good question. I'm going to try to answer that as well as I can. It depends. It depends a lot on where the cluster is in the hive, and is that brick sitting directly on top of the cluster. um, that is really going to dictate how quickly they eat it in general. So if most of the bees are in the bottom box and that brick is sitting up on top of the second box, and there's virtually no bees in contact with it, it may take all winter for them to eat it. If the cluster is right up against that brick, they could probably eat it in a couple of weeks. So it really just depends on where is that cluster, how close is that brick to the cluster. But I would say, general rule of thumb, assuming it's right near the cluster, anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. I would say in the south, it's going to take a little bit longer in the north. The bees aren't moving quite as much.
hmm I agree completely. And that's about 3 to 4 weeks is about what it takes in my bees anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Good answer. Can I freeze frames with crystallized honey in them and feed to the bees later? Crystallized honey being the key
Yeah.
word here.
You sure? I mean, it's going to take a minute for the bees to eat crystallized honey out of a frame. They may not actually eat it out. What I often find is that when a frame is fully crystallized, I'm sitting here thinking, is that question in the book? I think it is. I think there's something similar. But
It
it made me
is.
think, okay, good. I was like, ooh, did I miss that one? But I think it is in there. Um, so yeah, I mean, you absolutely can. You may not even have to freeze it. I mean, you could just store the frame. You don't have to necessarily freeze it. You
Right.
can. You don't have to. And then you can feed it to the bees. If you find that the bees are not really eating it out of the frame in the hive this spring, you may just have to set that frame 20 or 30 feet
Mhm.
away from the hive and let bees raw that honey out of it. But it's
Mhm.
fine to feed it. That's no problem at all if they'll eat it.
My experience in that is they do a relatively decent job if it's not just rock hard crystalline.
Yes,
That
correct.
falls under that, dry sugar feeding almost, and then they need
Right.
more moisture to be able to dissolve that
Exactly.
crystallized honey.
Yeah, exactly.
Great answer. Number three, any risk of reusing frames that had deformed wing virus bees after freezing them? Basically, if I freeze it, will that still be? And is there a risk of using that? Is that something bees can catch?
Um, no, I wouldn't be worried about that, especially if it's been frozen, it's been a significant period of times, and it's just the honey, it's not the bees. No, I wouldn't be concerned about that.
Well, and it's just the frame. I mean,
Right,
really, the bees aren't on there anymore. The
right,
bees are the deformed wing virus is a result of a high infestation of varroa mites. And
right.
as long as you're not transferring a live frame with varroa mites, you're not really
Exactly,
having a problem. So
exactly.
freezing really
Right,
well.
right.
So. All right, number four. I have a laying worker hive with a lot of bees and honey. Do you think I should try to salvage the honey and foundation now, or do you think it'll last until spring? I know this feeling. Oh,
It's the worst. It's
it's
the
the
worst.
worst.
You know, it's a really good question. I think if there are a lot of bees and a lot of honey, I mean, they're not going to survive the winter. You wouldn't want to combine that with another hive. You know, you could, I would shake the bees out and I would store the equipment. You know, you could just leave the bees in there. They're going to just keep eating the honey.
Mhm,
You know, that's kind of a waste of honey because that hive's not
mhm,
going to survive.
mhm.
So I would probably just shake the bees out, and then you could put the boxes of honey on another hive if you have a hive that needs that honey, or you could just store the comb and the honey and the equipment to be used next year. Um, that's probably what I would do.
I would do exactly the same thing. Like, I think I would just take it apart. I've left them where they
Hmm.
just fend for themselves over winter. And it's really all it is kicking the can because you're going to have to deal with this come spring because they're going to
Yeah,
dwindle so much over winter
exactly.
that you're just,
Exactly.
you really are just putting off the inevitable. I'd take what's good out of it, share it with anybody else that needs it, and break it down and be done with it, not put
Yeah,
them through stress over winter.
I agree.
I agree
I agree.
completely.
And I'm sorry.
Number
Yeah.
five, just checked my hives. The two that are in the shade have mold on the lids. What can I do to decrease the moisture? I had
Mm.
three questions, the same problem.
Wow.
So moisture's
Interesting.
being a problem.
Yes. Well, you know, having hives in the sun rather than the shade is helpful. Talk about that a lot in the book.
Mhm,
But
yes.
you know, really what you need is you need some upper ventilation. You need that moisture to be able to vent out of the hive. So I would just crack the lid, you know, get a popsicle stick or something. I mean, you don't even need enough air for or space for a bee to fit there. You just need the smallest opening so the bees can that moist air can vent out of that top. And that should really, really help. Interestingly, you know, stand soft sugar bricks are pretty good for this too, because they absorb moisture and then the bees eat the brick. So that actually works quite well. So you're helping the bees with feed, it's absorbing the moisture. It's kind of a win-win-win. But you know, a little bit of ventilation is really going to help cut down on that mold. The mold itself, I'm not really worried about. The mold doesn't hurt the bees. What will hurt the bees is if that moisture is raining down on the cluster throughout the winter.
Hmm.
The other thing that you can do is you can tilt your hive one direction or the other, you know, tilt it backwards a couple inches or forwards a couple inches. And that'll help if moisture does collect on the lid, that instead of just raining down on the cluster, it runs to the front of the hive or it runs to the back of the hive and runs down the wall rather than dripping on the bees. So, um, yeah, I would vent it a little bit, tilt it one direction or the other, and then consider doing a sugar brick to absorb some of that moisture too.
Very, very great answer. And I don't know if everyone does, but a lot of our inner covers have a little notch, and
Yeah.
that's an upper entrance right there. I do find that I have to push the telescopic cover to the front for it to have room because there's a little wiggle room in that telescopic
Hmm.
cover. So push it
Right.
to the front, notch down if you have a notch or a cup, notch, and that works for a little bit of ventilation as well. So
Exactly.
great
Good
answers, Blake.
questions. Great questions. Thank you, guys. All right. Thank you, Sherry. All right, let's jump into the rest of the classroom and talk about some practical things you need to be paying attention to this December. So winter is here. You know, we're kind of on this normal roller coaster of warmer days, colder days. There's really no measurable nectar or pollen anywhere. Hive growth has ended, and winter's here to stay. And so I don't expect to see much bee activity. I don't expect to see brood in the hive, much brood in the hive unless you're far south. Um, Flows are all over. We're going to get some warm days in the south and the central US where the bees will fly a little bit. But by and large, the cold is largely here to stay. Inside December hives, this is kind of what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot of bees and honey around the edges of the frames. The picture on the far right, does have a little bit of brood. Some hives, I am seeing little patches of brood, but by and large, I don't expect to see much brood in the hive. Feeding is a big thing that we need to be paying attention to as beekeepers. In the southern half of the US, we want to maintain that 30 to 40 pounds of stores in the second box with 3 to 4 frames of honey in the bottom box. That's for a deep box full of bees or more. So a good, strong, healthy hive. In the northern half of the US, our goal is to maintain 50 to 60 pounds of stores in the second box and 3 to 4 frames of honey in the bottom box. If a hive has less than a deep box full of bees, um, or I'm sorry, if a hive has less food than that, feed them a sugar brick or other winter feeding methods. Just giving them liquid syrup isn't really going to help this time of year because the bees aren't really traveling to go find that syrup this time of year. So if you do need to feed, if your hive has less food than it needs, your here are your options. One of standstill sugar bricks works great. That's my number one go-to method. Fondant can work as well. It just doesn't have all the nutrients that one of stand sugar bricks has. A Ziploc bag or chicken feeder full of liquid syrup directly on top of the cluster, like you see in the picture here, in that middle picture, can work too. You can also get frames of honey from another hive. If you have a hive that has died or a hive that has more honey than it needs, then you can get frames of honey from that hive and place them inside the weaker hive that needs food on either side of the cluster. Those are your best bets for feeding, kind of emergency feeding in the winter. And just remember, the goal is to provide direct access to the bees with the food. So, if you put an entrance feeder on, the bees are never going to go down to the entrance and get the food this time of year. That food has to pretty much be in direct contact with the cluster. Feeding pollen substitute in the winter isn't necessary, but it also won't hurt anything. Just make sure the patty is to the side and not blocking the winter cluster from forming between the two boxes. Lots of beekeepers stop feeding in December, but start again in mid-January. So, not necessary, but can still be helpful. Entrance reducers and screen bottom boards, it's time to install your entrance reducers. So if you haven't done that yet, now's the time to install those entrance reducers. Screen bottom boards, you don't have to remove them. You just need to make sure cold wind isn't blowing up under those bottom boards and chilling the cluster. So block off underneath the hive so cold wind can't blow underneath them. This is unfortunately the time of year where we do have a lot of dead hives. And so those weak hives can die after a few cold snaps. Varroa and viruses are often the culprits. 9 times out of 10, when you have a hive die this time of year, it's because they were weakened back in the summer by varroa mites, etc. And so your goal this time of year is to pick up that dead equipment and store it safely so mice and raccoons, etc., don't damage it. Honey and pollen can be used in splits next year, and don't give up. I mean, that comb, that leftover honey and pollen is so valuable. That's really where the value is. And if next year, if you dump a swarm or a package or put a nook in that equipment, they're going to grow so much faster next year because they've already got comb, maybe some honey ready to go. So it's super discouraging when we lose hives this time of year, but don't forget all the work you did of getting that drawn out comb is incredibly valuable for starting over next year. Removing boxes, a couple things to keep in mind. My goal this time of year is to make sure my bees have enough food. And if I've got more than 2 boxes, I often remove that third or fourth box. I want to make sure that they have plenty of honey. Sometimes if I've got 4 boxes on a hive, I might consolidate the honey down into just a couple of boxes. and then take off the excess boxes. Look at your hive on a warm, sunny day, maybe when it's 50 degrees, 50 or 60 degrees, to see, how many of the boxes they're filling up. And again, if you've got a box that's, has less than 25% full of bees and less than 25% full of honey, you can probably go ahead and pull those boxes off. Something else you might notice is winter wax moth damage. Now, typically wax moths are not active this time of year, but a lot of times beekeepers see problems or are seeing dead hives this time of year because they're checking their hives and the hive died maybe earlier in the fall, and maybe they're just now catching it. So it's not uncommon that beekeepers are dealing with dead hives this time of year. So if you have a hive and then if your comb looks like this, just with some minimal wax moth damage, maybe a little bit of webbing, I would absolutely reuse this. I wouldn't even bother scraping it off. I would just let those combs get below freezing. So leave them maybe outdoors on a freezing night, and that'll kill any remaining wax moth larvae or eggs. These frames with this kind of damage can just be stored and reused next year. Bees will quickly and easily clean this up, no problem. Same with the frame on the left. I might pull that webbing off just to get it out of the way, but not a big deal. Can absolutely reuse it. No problem. Picture on the right is what we see. Sometimes if there's a lot of wax moth damage in a hive, you'll see all this residue on the front. That's pretty unusual to see that level of it. Now, if you've got frames that look like this, I would throw those frames away. So in these instances, I would just burn those frames, or I just put them in a trash bag and throw them away. They are far beyond saving. Personally, I wouldn't even bother scraping the comb off and trying to reuse the frame and foundation. For $3, $4, you can get a brand new frame. It's just not worth the effort of scraping all this comb off, recoating the plastic foundation with beeswax, and 50% of the time, the bees aren't going to draw that frame out properly the second time around because, it just got so dirty. It's really hard to get that foundation clean enough to really recoat it and get the bees to reuse it. So when you get this level of damage, my strong opinion is throw it away and start over with new frames. So if you are, as you're inspecting your hives this time of year, what's normal to see in December? What's normal is no brood, no eggs, or maybe a couple frames of brood if you're in the far south. But if you go through your hive and you're not seeing any brood or eggs, I wouldn't worry. That's normal in December. You may see zero to very minimal pollen stores. Again, I'm not too worried about that because the bees don't have brood. They don't need a lot of pollen. Um, you're going to see very slow pollen patty and syrup consumption. So the bees, it's like the temperature, everything is just slowing down. They're not going to drink a lot of syrup. They're not going to eat a lot of sugar bricks. They're not going to eat a lot of pollen patties. They're just going to slow down because they're going into hibernation. You're going to see swings in visible population based on temperature. If you're cracking that hive open quickly and looking at it on a sunny day at 30 degrees, it's going to look like a pretty small hive versus at 55 degrees. That's very normal as well. So if you do need to move your bees, cold days are great for moving hives. So if you want to move them to a new property, a new location, wait for a cold day that's under 45 degrees and cloudy. It's a great time to pick up and move your bees. I do want to offer a little bit of caution here in that bees will absolutely still come out of the hive even at 20 degrees. So, if it's a strong hive, I've seen bees come out. I've moved bees when it's, 12, 15 degrees, 20 degrees outside. And if you jostle them enough, you can get some bees to come out if it's a really strong hive. So you still want to seal up that entrance before you move the bees, just to be safe. But cold weather, great time to move bees. You may also see cleansing flights. So when you do have those occasional 55-degree sunny days, you may see a lot of the bees coming and going on cleansing flights. That's very normal. They're not swarming. Bees don't swarm in the winter, but you may see a lot of bursts of activity as bees go on cleansing flights, especially if they've been cooped up in the hive for, a couple weeks, not able to fly. When they finally get the chance to, you're going to see a lot of activity. Last little tip here for you. Bees and animal feed, sawdust and neighbors. So now that the honey flow is over, the flowers are all dead. When you do get those warm days, bees are going to come out. They are going to forage, and they're going to be looking for anything that resembles nectar or pollen. Frequently what they find is the neighbor's animal feed. So if your neighbors have chickens or if they have any kind of animals that they're putting feed out for, or if they've got a wood shop and they've got sawdust, bees will actually go try to forage on the dust because that dust resembles pollen. And I get more complaints from neighbors in the wintertime almost than any other time of year because the bees are bothering their animals, they're bothering their garage, trying to get into their wood shop. One thing I do to help with this is I will put out dry pollen. So I'll get pollen substitute, a dry mix, and I'll put it out so the bees kind of divert their interest to that dry pollen sub rather than the neighbor's, dust in their garage or the sawmill or the sawdust. So if you live in a populated area, and you're in the South where you're going to have these warm days where bees are flying, I would go ahead and get an open feeder, which my favorite open feeder for feeding pollen substitute is a Pro Nook. So that if you bought Nooks from us, for example, they came in those plastic Pro Nooks. All I do is I put a couple pounds of pollen sub powder inside that Pro Nook, put the lid on, and then the entrance pull off the entire entrance guard so that now there's just a hole that the bees can come and go from on the entrance. And then you can put that pro feeder, up in a tree 5, 6 feet off the ground so the varmints don't eat that pollen sub. And that's a great open feeder for bees in the wintertime. So you might just go ahead and get that on hand so that you can get ahead of any neighbor complaints. And then you can also tell the neighbors, hey, we've got feed out for them. We're doing everything we can to prevent that issue. So with that, those are our quick tips for December. I hope you have a great Christmas. Please check out the book. Check the link in the bio below and the description below. I'd love to get one of my books in your hands. Let Cayman and I know what you think of it. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you all in January.